Obviously, 2020 was a really tough year economically. It could be a natural conclusion to believe that there is no funding available for people who want to start a business in 2021. In this video, I want to debunk that myth because there actually is funding available. Now, as the franchise consultant, I am not the lending expert. I am the resource guiding my candidates to the expert. And that's what we're going to do in this video. I have set up a great conversation with two of America's top funding organizations who specialize in franchise lending to talk about the opportunities that are available this year in 2021 if you have the dream to start a franchise business. I have Eric Schecterman from Benetrends, because I can't say his last name, and Shirley Kefgen of FranFund, two of America's best franchise lending resources. These guys are experts at what they do. As the franchise consultant, you know I never try to be the expert. I only try to be the resource to help my candidates find the information that they need. And that's why I'm bringing this resource to you today. Today, I want to have a conversation about lending during the pandemic and into this new year, 2021. What is that like? How has lending changed? Has it changed? Is there money available? With all the PPP money we saw the government putting out there, did that change lending for small business? So here to answer that question today, again, I have Eric of Benetrends and Shirley from FranFund. Let's start with you today, Shirley. Talk a little bit about the lending landscape and things that you've seen changing and happening since COVID hit last March.
So I think the first thing that's important to understand is that there is money out there. There are banks out there that are excited to lend money to new businesses. So I think I heard some rumors last year that, banks aren't lending money. They're not moving forward with startup businesses. And luckily, that really is just not the case. So that's probably the blanket statement, is that yes, there is funding available. Banks excited about moving forward with startups. With that being said, we do have to bring them folks that on paper will look like they can pay this loan back. So there are definitely certain qualifications in place. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a maybe misconception about SBA loans that they are there for folks who don't have financial resources behind them. And the reality is you do have to have some financial resources behind you, but there are all sorts of loan programs, for smaller service-based businesses where maybe you or your employees are going to your customers to provide services. There are also loan programs out there for your, brick and mortar restaurants and gyms and salons and more traditional business models that folks are used to. We have seen, I think this year, we have started to see more and more banks becoming comfortable again with startup lending. So that has been exciting to sort of see a wider bench of lenders out there that are actively working in this world. So I've been pretty encouraged recently.
That's excellent. Eric, what have you seen?
Probably the line I've used way too many times, I'm going to stick to it here in 2021 is if all you use is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And I feel like in previous lending environments, people were just coming in with like an SBA hammer, I'm just going to do this, or a rollover hammer. In 2021, there are so many different ways to fund a business. There are so many different tools you can utilize, but you have to learn about them. Whether, I'm seeing more combination. Maybe it's looking into what is rollover funding, what are SBA loans. I mean, Shirley can probably comment. I know I've seen here the amount of people that, now we're going back the home equity line of credit route, a portfolio loan route. I had a client the other day that literally combined 4 or 5 different funding programs. And yes, I would agree with Shirley. I would say the SBA world of today, or even the lending world, forget even SBA, in 2021, to me, is more like every other year I've ever seen in funding. I feel like the outlier was more 2017 to 2019, where I feel like maybe lending I've used the analogy a little bit like the mortgage world of the early 2000s, maybe a little loose here, just firing money out. You get a loan, you get a loan, you get a loan. Um, so if you have not been exposed to that and you're just starting to look at a business, you should really be going in expecting what you would always expect. Banks are looking for good businesses with good buyers, and when they see that, there's a lot of different ways to access capital. And probably the biggest change that I've seen in also perception is I feel like sometimes the perception has been smaller is better. And I would almost say it's the opposite here in 2021. Bigger is better. When you're thinking about the banks, the larger loans, the larger projects, the larger build outs, that does not scare them. If anything, it probably entices them more. Now, there's great opportunities for both. But I've met a lot of people that are like, oh, well, I'm only looking at this because I figure the banks might like this size. And I'm like, well, no. I mean, with where commercial real estate is right now and what landlords are doing on build outs and some of the lease rates that these people can get to get them to profitability faster and having some tangible assets, banks like that $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 project size or that multiple unit build out size, or maybe a couple of years ago it was different. So I'm motivated right now from what I see in the lending landscape.
I love it. Let's talk about two things. I want to address the timing to get a loan. Has that been affected? And then also, what are some of the qualifications? I mean, I'm sure the answer is going to be it depends, but I want to hit on that a little bit just to sort of tee up that conversation for anybody who may be listening.
Sure. So as far as timing is concerned, you should not expect loans to move very quickly today. That's the reality of the lending environment, but it's for good reason. It's because the same banks that are writing startup loans have also been helping existing business owners with PPP loans, right? And we need that. That's a good thing. But obviously that does kind of, put a strain on manpower a little bit. And so part of the reason that you are seeing processing times maybe take a little bit longer than we might like with banks is because they are sort of dual focused right now. Now that will shift, these PPP applications that they're going to expire at some point, right? So this is not a forever situation. But the other thing that I think is good news in terms of why it's taking a long time is that there are a ton of applications out there. There are a ton of people jumping into business ownership and ready to get started, wanting their loan money right now. So while it might be taking longer than we would like, it is for good reason. So I mean, like Eric had said, I think it's another thing that keeps me motivated and excited because it's nice to see all of that bubbling up out there.
I love that, folks. You heard it from them and not just from the Daily Coach. People are starting businesses during COVID. Yes. Thank you for saying that, Shirley. That was awesome. Eric, do you want to pick up on that? What are some of the qualifications?
I was just sharing something with my team the other day. I think I saw a stat from the IRS where it was, the number of EIN, employee identification number requests. Once you take out like gig economy requests for, if I'm an Uber driver or certain things like that to start my own, but just independent new employee identification number, somebody that's filing for a new business is up like 28%. And a lot of those people are going after these loans. So yeah, as Shirley said, the timing with these loans, I think the joke I've used is the S for SBA does not stand for speed. But there are different stages along the way. There's a difference of you can still pretty efficiently get a bank to let you know if they're willing to issue terms on a loan. That's pretty much a bank saying, we've looked at your loan package. We like your business. We think you're a good fit. We'd like to offer you the following terms. That's one stage that I would say has probably remained unaffected timeline-wise. Where we're seeing the biggest timeline sort of gap is in underwriting and closing. But at that stage, you should feel pretty comfortable of your fundability. So it's really not impacting or slowing down the decision of business ownership. So that's helpful there.
Can I interrupt you, Eric?
Yes.
Yeah, can I interrupt you? So if the franchise exploratory process with the Daily Coach takes 1 to 2 months, I typically start the financing conversation around week 2 once I know that they kind of have 2 or 3 companies that they have general interest in and they're thinking they want to start courting, hopefully leading to this potential marriage. I introduce the financing conversation. Are you in agreement with starting the funding process that early?
I would, earlier is always better. I know Shirley and I have often used the analogy of it's like buying a home. You don't go looking for the house until you've been pre-qualified for the mortgage, and then you know what neighborhood you should shop in. So the earlier that you can get engaged, I mentioned the tools before, and knowing what all of your tools are, sometimes can completely change what you're looking for. So yeah, earlier is better. And I will say, if you are pursuing a loan, um, a lot of people think that they can't start working on the loan packaging items until they bought or picked the business. Listen, I could submit an SBA loan for any franchise in the country today. I've never even could have spoken to them if I wanted, as long as I had the numbers and the guidance to put it together. So the sooner you can start that process and get engaged, absolutely the better.
I was just going to say the other thing with timing is it's not always just about understanding a pre-approval amount. It's understanding how an SBA loan works. So, part of it is just the data, because what you don't want is a surprise when you're ready to say yes to a franchisor. You don't want a surprise at that point. So it's really important that the conversations have happened around funding, certainly to understand pre-approval amounts, but also so that you have a good foundation in terms of how will this work? What will this look like for me? Should I move forward? Because I think you really want to get that out of the way early.
You know what? That's exactly what I was going to say. I find that candidates who can have an initial conversation about how lending works, it's like taking a weight off of your shoulders. To what you said, Eric, it gives clarity to the conversation, because sometimes just because you qualify for a loan, you may say, well, I'm not willing to do that. And then that helps you narrow down your selection of options to maybe other ones that have smaller investments. On the flip side, sometimes when you find out you qualify for a loan like that, you go, wow, that's my dream business. And now it helps you eliminate other options and focus in on the one that you really are the most excited about anyway, right? So the more clarity you can put around how you would pay for it if you decided to do it and were approved to do it, the sooner you do that, the better I think the entire process will go. So we're all in agreement there.
Yeah, I think that's usually the response that we see when people learn about access to retirement funds or how to access their stock portfolios. You meet with a lot of people. Well, here's my cash. How can I use that and either combine that with a loan? And then somebody learns, wait a minute, I can access retirement funds without having to pay tax or penalty. And I've got this money over here. Well, now I'm putting that money to play through business ownership and investing in myself, or I can take a loan against my stock portfolio and not have to sell those investments. I mean, the common responses to both of those programs are, why didn't I know about this, and how can I use it for a business? So it's
Right.
those are really exciting conversations that we get to have.
You know what? Money is our most emotional subject, right? So let's be real. This financial conversation, when people want to put it off, I feel like it's because they don't really want to face the reality of what they're trying to do. On the flip side, when we can engage them early in this financial conversation, I think it helps people start to move through the emotional process that goes along with the logical due diligence, right? They both have to be there in order for a candidate to say yes to a business and to their dream to own a business, correct? Yeah. And that's really what we're saying. It's all part of the process, and the timing of it coincides with as you're exploring, not, hey, I'm going to find my business and then figure out how I'm going to fund it.
Yeah, that's a mistake. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I
That's
actually
awesome.
think sometimes it almost, the excitement can even scare people. And I know that's a good thing, but it's like, oh, wait a minute, I can actually do this. Like,
Yeah.
I can do this on my own, and I don't need lending. Wow, this is real. I'm scared, but I mean, listen, I'm sure you've shared this as well. And we have 2 requirements in Benetrends. 1, you got to promise to be successful, and 2, you got to promise you're going to be scared. Because if you're not scared, you're not going to be successful in the first place. So it's a good thing that having a coach to take you through that process helps. because they know that that's a natural response. But don't be afraid of finding out that fear early on.
That's really great. Okay, I have two final questions. Shirley, I'm going to ask you, we've mentioned this 401k, but we haven't really explained what that is. I'm sure there's many people saying, what? Touch my 401k. So let's talk about the 401k rollover. That's your question. And then Eric, to wrap it up, just a high level, I know it probably highly depends, but just like what are some of the qualifiers or what are banks looking for in order for you to be a credit-worthy person for a franchise investment? Those are my final two questions for your time today. So Shirley, why don't you start with that 401k explanation?
Okay, so we've mentioned this 401k rollover. It's called the rollover for business startup, or you'll see the acronym ROBS, ROBS, like the one time ever that the IRS gets creative. So thanks for that. But what this program allows folks to do is access money that they might have in a 401k from an old job, or maybe an IRA that they've rolled funds into, or a 403b if they worked for a nonprofit. So lots of different account types will qualify. But what this strategy allows folks to do is take some of their own retirement savings, and instead of having that money invested in Best Buy or Home Depot stock, they can actually invest that money right into the stock of their own business without paying income taxes or early withdrawal penalties, because it's not money that's going in your pocket that would be viewed as income. It truly is an investment into the business itself. And so, it's a strategy that you can use to start a business without creating any debt. It is a strategy that you could combine with a borrowing option to really come up with the total amount of capital that would be necessary, but a really, really popular program.
And talk about an emotional response. A lot of times when we talk about the 401k with people, I'm never going to touch my 401k, right? And then inevitably, when they get educated, if they're open-minded, like 100% of them end up doing it, right? Right. We love you all. We love all your assumptions. I mean, we would make them too, I suppose, right? We didn't know what we know, so we can't sit over here on a high horse. We just have different perspective because this is what we do for a living. This is how we help people every day.
And we wouldn't have anyone to talk to if folks weren't.
And we would have no fun if everybody was just agreeable.
That's right. Keep making those assumptions, and Eric and I will keep helping you straighten them out, and we'll all be in good shape.
That's fantastic. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you for that. For more information about the ROBS program, Shirley and Eric's contact information will be in the notes, in the comments below the video, so you can check that out. But Eric, to wrap up this amazing and stimulating, inspiring funding conversation, tell us a little bit about the qualifications that people may need. What does a bank look for in order to say that you're credit worthy? Or lending worthy, I'm sorry, not credit worthy.
Sometimes people have referred to like the 5 C's, character, collateral, all these different things. I always say, looking for a loan, especially through the SBA and through the banks, 3 things matter. Liquidity, liquidity, liquidity. It's amazing how banks will overlook other areas of worthiness gaps, for lack of better words, when there's stronger liquidity that's there. And I think probably the biggest challenge that we've seen with lending today or qualifications with borrowers is actually something referred to as post-closing liquidity. And what that refers to is if I go to get an SBA loan, typically the bank's going to look for, I'll just pick an easy number, call it 20% to come from me, and then they're going to give me a loan for the remaining amount. So if I'm buying a business for $200,000, I'm not the best at math, I put $50,000 of my own in, they give me a loan for the remaining $150,000. If I have that $50,000 in cash or in my liquid, great, that's my injection. That's not what always the bank's the most concerned about. What they're more concerned about is, okay, after Eric cuts that check for that $50,000, who's paying his mortgage next month? Who's paying his bills for the next 2 to 3 months? And I know they won't say it. More important to them, who's paying their loan? Who's paying the bank loan while this business is being built? So that whole idea of after I put my money in, what money is left over in a liquid form for me to cover my personal living expenses, my debt of the loan on top of that. And that's what brings up the program Shirley just talked about. Being able to create liquidity through retirement funds or create liquidity through a stock portfolio or other forms, so I don't have to touch my post-tax liquid, and show that to a bank as being, that's my post-closing liquidity to pay for my life and everything else. That's more important than anything else. Of course, there's, you want to have a credit score that doesn't have any really negative history. Sometimes banks will require personal collateral on a loan depending on the loan size. But to me, liquid is probably the healthiest form of qualification, and we'll help you navigate the rest from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Shirley, anything to add to that? I really liked that answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Eric's right. It's really interesting because I can talk to two people in one day who look fairly similar on paper, but could have totally different options when it comes to what banks are willing to do based on where they live or what business model they might be moving forward with. And so I think that's the thing that's important, is working with us, to help really explore what works for you. Because I think we found, probably more last year than ever, that funding is really not a one size fits all sort of conversation. And so, those one-on-one consultations really help folks figure out what could work.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
Just
it helps
like
clarify. I'm sorry. I think it helps clarify as well that, as I'm sure, Kim, you see when people are looking at franchises, people's perception of what profitability or break even is. Same thing when we meet with somebody and they say, well, net worth, my net worth is this. When you own $1 million home and you owe $950,000 on it, it doesn't mean that million's in your net worth. So sometimes just helping people understand it. And I guess I would wrap it up with saying, hope is not a funding strategy. Learn what's out there, get the consultation. And I'm sure, you'll learn from FranFund, from Benetrends, from anybody that you work with. To learn costs you nothing.
Right.
Why not learn what's out there and learn all of your options and learn how you can take control of your future?
Right. Exactly. So well said. And really, I mean, everything that I do for candidates in the franchising space in terms of getting to know their interests and their skill sets and what they're trying to accomplish through the business, and then bringing great franchise opportunities to them to look at, then you amazing people do in the lending space. And really, I mean, I couldn't do what I do at the level that I do it without the work that you do. I mean, you are my true partners in my business and have been for the 19 years that I've been a consultant. So I am so happy to give you the opportunity to share your knowledge and expertise, and hopefully to inspire people who are listening to this conversation to remain open-minded, be willing to ask the questions and just see what the answers are, right? They don't have to be right. You don't have to say yes, even if the answers are good ones, right? But by having the information, oftentimes it takes the gray area out. The gray is always where it's uncertain, and uncertainty is never comfortable. Once we know in black or white, we can get comfortable with it or not. But then it's black or white and it's yes or no. So I really appreciate the time. Again, to all the viewers watching this video, Eric and Shirley's contact information at Benetrends and FranFund will be in the comments below. If you have any questions about selecting the right business and or funding a franchise business, you always can reach out to the Daily Coach as well. Leave me a comment or contact me today. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed that insightful conversation about franchise lending. For more information on how to reach out to my friends in franchise lending, please see the description below, or always you can contact the Daily Coach.